Hello, readers. Welcome to 20 Questions with Your Favorite Author, where we ask authors important questions like, why would you agree to be on this podcast? I'm Kelly Lynn Colby, Editorial Director at Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. Our guest this week is DJ Bodden, writer of science fiction and adventurous traveler. Likes to make people laugh for the wrong reasons, tries to sell people grimoires disguised as fiction, is scared of spiders, and only recently learned to ride a bike. He lives in Switzerland with his wife and thinks it's important that they should someday be adopted by a fox. If he's not your favorite now, he will be after. Welcome, DJ. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing awesome. Anything that starts with trumpets is probably going to be a good event.
No, that was the plan. That was the plan all along. We must announce our presence. Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, are we ready to get to these questions?
Absolutely. I'm totally not panicked about these at all.
Oh, don't worry. They're not that scary.
Mm-hmm.
Ready for the first one?
Yep.
All right. Where do you get your ideas?
Wow. So I'm a science fiction writer, so I'm going to apologize in advance. The human brain is capable of processing 50 bits per second. So 50 little yes/nos of data per second. And if you've ever had to try to run your computer or on your internet connection, that's not a heck of a lot. We can actually process over 11 billion bits per second in our subconscious. So I would tell you that I read a lot, and I try to read a variety of things. Like sometimes I really like when I'm launching a new book or a new series, I'll deliberately go and find new authors who are writing their first books, and we'll do I'll read your book, you read mine. If we want to, we can do a review of that. But I like to take in those new books because, one, they don't know what they're not supposed to do yet. So you get a lot of kind of fresh perspectives. And the second thing is it gets your brain going in terms of, okay, that's a cool idea, right? But it's all about how you execute it. How could that have been done differently? How can that start a new creative process? I think when I wrote the latest books, it was kind of centered around this idea of if I took Star Wars, right, which is about a poor farmer boy orphan who wanted to be a pilot and leave his planet, and then got sucked up into a global or a galactic conspiracy. What would happen if that kid had actually been born into a privileged elite? He'd gone to the best schools, he'd had all the best things, and then he decided, you know what, I'm going to dump all that and go off and be a pilot. And that's a little bit of a different story. It's just a twist on the existing thing. Mm-hmm. And then because I'm a pantser. So great. And I really I have an idea of the general direction I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. I call it action figure playtime. You know, when you were a kid and you had the two action figures and you mashed them together, I try to grab characters who have very different ideas about what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. And I put them in a room together and I let them fight. And that usually takes my story into unexpected directions. So I was actually writing a piece the other day, and I had it all planned out, right? This character was going to travel to a system that would take 4 days because it's this distance and there's these gates between it, and she's gonna go from there and make up an excuse to go to this space station, and she's gonna talk to this guy that she hired, and it's gonna be all this thing. And I started writing it, and all of a sudden the taxi driver was actually sent by the person she was thinking she was gonna go have to hunt down. And by the way, he can lock the doors, gas her, and drop her off at any point. And he wanted to make that point to her. And he doesn't do that. He drops her off where she's expecting to go and says goodbye and remember, we're watching you. But that was completely unscripted. So I think sometimes it's just a question of you get a feel for when are you bored, when are you exciting, what would really make this a really interesting or bad moment for that character, and let's throw them into the shark pool.
Excellent. Torture your characters. I like that. That's a good way to come up with ideas. Mm-hmm. I find it works. I want you to know that the chat is picking you up as a fellow IT nerd, like half of them. Is that true?
Yeah, no, that's pretty true. In my mild-mannered day job, I'm the COO of a tech company. We work in blockchain traceability and kind of data aggregation of bringing things together, and basically the type of work we do is we work with supply chains where a lot of the stuff is still done on paper, and I think as non-traditionally published authors and publishers, we know the power of data, right? Once you start measuring things, that's when you can understand your readers. That's when you can understand your business. That's when you can make money. That's when you can find new readers. That's when you can learn which stories to tell, right?
Spreadsheets are our friend.
Yeah, exactly. But don't tell people that, because then they'll know you're really a nerd, not a geek, which is another fun distinction.
I'm both.
Yeah, that's good. Me too. But until you have that data, you can't control your business, and you're stuck in the 50s, right? Or sooner than that. So what we're trying to do is help people who are still working with paper and say, okay, here's the deal. You don't have to learn this big, massive, complex system. You don't have to learn how to program. I'm going to teach you to upload your piece of paper. And our system is going to stitch all those things together and help you turn that into one big, long chain that means something instead of being an isolated piece of data. And you're going to have access to it, and your clients are going to have access to it, and your banks are going to have access to it, and whoever you share it with is going to have access to it. Because we think that can really transform people's lives. If you can measure something, then you can change it.
Excellent. That sounds like a fun business plan. It also sounds frustrating trying to convert people. I know that's half of our job, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, the crowd.
I was actually I was a Marine before I was a coffee trader, before I was a tech guy. And
by the way, notice the trend
in the Marine Corps. What's that?
I want to make sure the chat notices the trend that these writers that we talk to, including myself, and like every one of them, have multiple jobs. Yeah. Like, we didn't just come out of the womb writers, right? I mean, we did. But my point is, we take all of that experience from all these multiple jobs and then add it to the book. So it's pretty cool. Thank you for staying with that trend. I like it.
Absolutely. And I think that does play in, right? I mean, obviously, if you're writing military sci-fi, then knowing what the pointy end is probably a good thing. But I actually,
or just the culture, knowing the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's like the difference between Australia and a yogurt. One of them will eventually develop a culture. I say that in jest. Australians are lovely people, and I absolutely love flying foxes. They're the absolute most wonderful creatures, and probably the only thing in Australia that's not actively trying to kill you.
That's why we won't go.
What's that?
That's why we will not go. We decided a long time ago. We've heard enough stories of Australia, firsthand stories, not even on the TV, and everything is trying. Even the pollen is trying to kill you. Yeah. So we're out.
You know, I thought it was pretty safe. I was just staying in Sydney. We were fine, and me and my buddy were walking down the street. And as he's walking by, and I'm scared of spiders, by the way. As he's walking by, this giant golden orb weaver is hanging 2 inches to the left of his head, and he just walks straight past it. And I'm like, and
see, that's what I would be afraid of. We have golden orb weavers here, just not as big as Australia. But yeah, no. She was just minding her own business, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all of those venomous ones they have, like 9,000 of them, so much so that they have antidotes in their drugstore. Yeah, no, I'm not all about that.
No, it's not cool.
No. Here, I have a question about your fivefold universe.
Okay.
So for everyone who doesn't know what that is, we see the awesome covers. How would you describe it?
So there's 2 sides to this, right? There's what does fivefold mean? In strictly science fiction terms, it's 5 dimensions. So we have 3 dimensions of space, we have 1 dimension of time, and then we have the extra one for the multiverse. But what we're really talking about is we wanted to bring together multiple genres within kind of a consistent experience. So, you know, you can maybe have an author that you really like for cyberpunk. You could really have an author that you love for military sci-fi. But when you're trying to find a new one, it can be kind of inconsistent. Like every once in a while, good cover inside, full of typos. Every once in a while, bad cover on the outside, but everyone recommends it, and you read it, and it's actually amazing. And what I was thinking when we were working with Shadow Valley Press and putting it together is, okay, well, we don't necessarily like one genre of sci-fi more than another. We like a lot of things, right? We like space opera. We like big fleet actions. We like planetary noir, where we're the Blade Runner type stuff. We like a good thriller, like think Tom Clancy, but 3,000 years in the future. We like all those things, and we want to give all those things kind of a consistent home, because sometimes, and I can only speak for certain authors, but the ones with like the wall of Post-its and the little twine going from between, and they're using 3 different iterations of Scrivener. Like I thought to myself, okay, that's great, but that's super complicated and that takes a lot of time that you could be using to tell great stories about great characters. So how about I build that for people? And you can come in and play and write your stories, and I will have done all that back work for you. And by the way, I'll get the science right. So I started with a 50-slide PowerPoint deck. We now have a wiki with a timeline and tech and explanations and like political systems and factions and what you can do and what you can't. We've got myself and 2 other authors writing in it right now, and we're looking on bringing on 6 more authors by the end of the year.
Wow, that's so cool. So you're like running your own publishing company here.
Kind of. I look at myself as a licensor. I'm an IP owner. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build something that's kind of built from the bottom up to be a fandom. That's going to be multi-genre, that's going to be a brand, and that's going to deliver the kind of experience and community and kind of crunchiness that a Star Wars, a Star Trek, a BattleTech, or a Warhammer 40K would.
It's very
But
clever.
We're starting from books, whereas they usually start from movies or board games.
That's very clever, like the 4 Horsemen. So there's a lot of people doing that. So I'm
Absolutely.
Really impressed. Really impressed. If I can talk Florida Kevin into it, we're going to do that with this Misplaced Mercenary series. Let's see. So that's nice, because I'm glad you can't see behind my camera, because I'm the one with the board and all of the index cards with the lines and the yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time, right?
It does, way more time. Sometimes I think I'm just procrastinating.
I've read that somewhere.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't like to write those things, though.
That's right. So it's already, like, if I was going to write, like you said, if I was going to write a Star Trek one, I could just write it.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes total sense to me. Let's see, you used an interesting tactic. So apparently you like your tactics, because this was cool, because I'm an editor also, right? So that's probably my favorite hat, is the editor hat. And in the Starborn Heir, where you showed your protagonist stealing, or it seems like he was stealing, it wasn't very clear, in the very beginning, a spaceship in an adrenaline-filled scene. And then you plop the reader back in time a few months, where the same character swore he'd never go to space.
Exactly.
That was so clever, because I will tell you, at that point, I could not stop reading, because I had to know what changed. So I'm wondering, what motivated you behind that decision to do it like that?
So I could tell you that I'm super smart and I just see around corners, right? But what I really do is I'm a strong believer in scene-based writing. I plot my books out in Scrivener. Usually what I'll start is I'll think about the character, the premise, the theme. I actually write my blurb first. So I start, the very first thing I do is think, what's the story that my reader wants to read? What's the experience? What's the kind of punch that you're going to get? And again, it was around that idea of, I want to tell Star Wars, but I don't want him to be a dumb farm kid. I want him to know stuff. I want him to have like a little bit of that suave charm, a little bit of experience, and when the defecation hits the ventilation and then circulates through the pipes, he's actually going to have like a wealth of experience to fall back on. And by the way, his significant other is a cybernetics doctor, so she's not going to be like a defenseless princess. She's actually going to have like built-in capacitors to shock people, and be able to take down cyborgs. And so what I really wanted in that is Zach is not like on his first flight. He's not he's not a character that's starting from nothing, but he has a lot to learn, and he works really hard at it, right? So what I wanted to show is by the end of this, you're going to have a character that is going to do all the Han Solo Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs stuff. And then I kicked him back to school. And I said, this is a highbrow academic in an ivory tower, and he knows nothing. And how do we get from that point to where we got in Gone in 60 Seconds, but in about 6 months. And I think, ultimately, you can talk about a couple different things. The true artist to tell someone the end before the beginning, and then show them how to get there. Right. If you a lot of it is run around Greek mythology, so you have the interplay of the fates as well. You have a certain idea that there are no new stories, right? All the stories in the world have already been told. No doubt. If you go with the monomyth, all the stories are basically the hero's journey. But how do I tell it? And it's kind of like throwing the gauntlet down, right? Saying, I'm going to give you the end of this book. Here you go. You've got it. If this is not the book you're interested in, you can walk away now. We're good. I have other books that may be more interesting for you. But if you don't like where this is going, this is probably not the book for you. And now I'm going to blow your mind with how we get there.
That's awesome. I just thought it was very clever. I might totally steal that because, that's what we do in the writing world.
Absolutely. Well, actually, artists never steal. We only get inspired.
Oh, I like that. That's a great saying. I'm going to have to write that down. Let's see. Your bio suggests that you travel extensively. And I will say with our pre-interview, you definitely travel extensively. So I have lots of questions about that. One, okay. I would like to know if you had to choose a place you've already been, so somewhere you've already been, just one place, which one would you revisit?
Visit or stay?
Just revisit.
I would go back to Hong Kong before the People's Republic closes it down. And I would go to, there's the tallest bungee jump in the world on a little island that's like 30 minutes off the coast. And I would go there and I would do that jump. I didn't do it at the time, one, for scheduling, two, for budget. And now I kind of wish I had. It's like 500 meters or 1,500 feet just off the top of the building. And I just think that would be amazing. And I want that in my like pool of things that I've done.
That sounds terrifying.
But totally safe, I think.
Okay. You set off a building. All I'm saying is you swing it right back into the building. Like, I can't see it any other way.
Yeah, I probably like getting there, right? I've seen the pictures and it looks amazing. You've got the harbor all around and stuff like that. But probably going to check the facade of the building for bloodstains. Just a good general principle. Is that rust or is that something else? Are
there really fat vultures just hanging around?
Yeah. That's definitely like one of those things that you want to check for is fat vultures.
Yes, always look for the fat vultures and then don't go there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mark Stallings, a fellow writer, asked me to ask you about an incident at a coffee plantation.
Which one?
He said there was something about shots being fired.
Okay. Yeah, so that was probably Papua New Guinea. Wait,
this happened more than once? You have to decide where it was?
Well, I've been to a couple to a couple countries, and I've been shot at in a couple different places. And that's a whole other barrel of fun. I remember I was in Afghanistan, and we were on base, so relatively safe area. And something happened in the wrong part of it. Bullet went off, zipped through the tent. I was so tired, I just went back to sleep. But neither here nor there. I didn't actually get shot at in Papua New Guinea. There's I don't know if you're familiar. It's one of the largest islands in the world. Half of it is kind of controlled by Indonesia. The other half was controlled by Australia. So the Indonesian half was controlled by the Dutch, and they gave it up to Indonesia. Whereas Australia controlled the eastern half and then turned it over to an independent government in the 70s. And it's one of the most dangerous places in the world. So you don't go running outside. You don't leave the compound. And this is if you're a guy. If you're a woman, it is just not a really safe place to be. But in certain areas that are not on the mainland, that are not away from the big cities, that are not behind closed walls, there are certain places where it's gorgeous. People hike the trails. You just have to know where you are. And one of the things that's kind of funny about Papua New Guinea is that their assumptions, they're very tribal culture, and it's actually enshrined in their constitution that you can't do anything to erase tribal identities. Like they have something like 246 languages on this one island.
It's just an island, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a really big one. Australia is also just an island.
Yeah, but Australia's a lot bigger than Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, that's true. So it's only, some of these tribes have only been contacted for a little while, and many of them still have their own local languages. They're not the same languages as the tribes around them, and they still fight. And their attitudes towards fighting are not, if we're thinking a very highbrow version, not very evolved. And if we want to put it in a different light, we'd say that they're still pretty tough people. So I remember, and I'm going to tell you this story because this is a story I can tell, and the others I can't. But I remember our guide, because we always had, whenever we were driving around, we always had one of the locals who was there, and he carried a knife and a pistol, and he had a scar on his arm. And that scar was from when one of the local tribes decided that this coffee plantation that he worked on, and that his kind of subunit of the tribe, they had houses on that farm. The farmer actually gave them lands to cultivate for themselves, both out of generosity and as self-preservation, because you'll defend what's yours. He had a hole through his arm where an arrow had actually gone through his biceps while they were trying to stop this group of other tribes people from coming and burning the whole place down. And they actually ended up burning the school that they had built, and many of the kind of, they used the kind of classic Tahitian palm huts. So those all got burned down, and in return, like they chased those people off their land, and everyone is still there. But the thing that really kind of sealed it for me is when he looked at that hole in his biceps. Nowadays in kind of a more westernized, modern culture, we would say, oh, that's a really terrible thing that happened to you. But he immediately laughed, which reminds me a little bit of my Marine Corps days. And the second question that one of the traders I was with, who had been there many times, asked him is, you really want them to come back so that you can kick their asses again, don't you? And he immediately said, yes, absolutely. So it's just kind of a reminder to me, especially when you're writing sci-fi, especially when you're dealing with planets that may have been isolated from each other and developed their entirely new cultures, when you're dealing with aliens who really should not be human. Check your assumptions at the door. And remember, everyone comes to a situation, whether they're an individual or a culture or a country, with their own sets of assumptions, and you need to be prepared to navigate within that.
I'm just impressed they were able to keep so much of their cultural identity between, the Dutch and the Australians trying to take over.
Yeah,
that alone is impressive.
Well, I think the Dutch and the Australians mainly stayed in the coastlines, and the highlands, which were just very dangerous, and there's not that much in terms of kind of natural resources to exploit until oil drilling became a thing. Were left mostly untouched, and there's like 2 million people up there, so it's a sizable population.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. Yeah, Florida Kevin calls them linguistic overachievers, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, the chat cannot decide if you work for the CIA or if you're Batman.
I'm not rich enough to be Batman, so let's steer towards the CIA, except the funny thing is everyone thinks I work for the CIA. So I'm either the most brilliant spy that ever lived or the worst one, and I can't decide which.
That's hilarious. That just sounds like a brilliant cover. No, I'm with you. Mm-hmm.
That's what my high school friends all think.
That's awesome. Yeah, Florida Kevin says DJ is both fascinating and entertaining, but I do not want to travel with him.
No, you shouldn't. I say yes to way too many things.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not that adventuresome. I'll just read your books and I'll get it secondhand.
You should. I mean, I think you should totally read my books, and then I would love your feedback, because I think it's kind of cool. I was talking to three people recently, and I asked them, where does my book start for you? The first book I wrote, I had a number of people who ended up loving it, absolutely loving it, and they loved me because of it. But they had to start it 5 times because the start was so slow. So now, almost as an overcompensating thing, I have to make my book start within the first couple pages. They have to start for me, or I'm not doing my job. And so you'll notice
it's a good thing to do anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You'll notice there's 3 starts to the book, right? There's the whiz bang space captain shots fired type stuff. Mm-hmm. There's the academic, where he's kind of like a really smart guy who knows a lot of things, and he's having an internal conflict over writing an essay of all things.
We'll never go to space.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he shows up at his girlfriend's front door unannounced after 6 months, and she lets him in. And depending on who I talk to, they each choose a different version of where the book starts for them. So you've mentioned it's that switch over from I'm a whiz-bang space captain to I'm riding an elevator in the best part of the city. I talked to a friend of mine today, super into spreadsheets. She's a big nerd. She's an intellectual. She likes we swapped books. I gave her my book, and she gave me Xi Jinlu's 3 Body Problem. So for her, the start is when he gets an exam question that he was not supposed to get. And that's what gets her, because she's such an enormous nerd, and I love that about her. So but it has to grab you. For me, if by the time you've crossed over the first 10% or even 8%, and I haven't got you, then either this book is not for you, or I'm doing my job wrong.
That makes sense. Well, you got me, so good job. So we need to finish this interview so I can get back to reading, just so you know. Well, speaking of locations, where's your favorite place to write?
That's a tough one. I have 2 answers for that. Okay. My best location to write is in a closed room with no internet connection and no music on, and it's midnight to 6 a.m. and everyone's asleep. My word count doubles. I've tracked it, obviously, because we're all nerds here. But I tracked the words per hour, and it literally doubles once I cross over midnight every single time. So that's the best place for me to write. I actually really enjoy writing in my English pub, the Irish pub that's downstairs, because I like the ambiance. I don't have an internet connection. It kind of takes me out of myself a little bit, where I'm listening to people who are very at ease with themselves and laughing and joking and calling each other the C word with a smile on their faces. And it kind of removes me from that thought that what I need to write right now is perfect. And I'm really bad about that. I actually write my books in 1 draft. And that's because I do 1 draft and I do editorial pass, and then it goes to the copy editor. And usually the editorial passes with AutoCrit and Grammarly. I do that because I agonize so much over every scene, and I'm essentially going through hundreds of drafts in my head, and I will literally just stop and stare at something and think, no, that's not right. And it's really it's a bit of a pain too, because Scrivener has terrible spell check. Yes. But it's the only tool I have that I know of where I can really drag things around and move things from one project to another, and really kind of get that cutting table feel to it, and color sort by character and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So all of that being said, that anything that allows me to just say, screw it, I'm just going to write this, is probably a good thing for me, or else I will write 1 book every 5 years. And by that point, it will be overchewed garbage.
Because you thought about it in your head too much.
Yes, absolutely.
I like it. That's
and
clever.
it'll get to the point where it's just there's so many plots overlapping that it's incomprehensible.
Well, I saw you had a Viridian Gate online series.
I do.
Starting with Nomad Soul. How did you get involved with that universe?
So I was actually thinking of quitting writing. I had
that would have been a tragedy.
Actually, really, for my mental health, writing is important. I started writing. I was getting out of the military, and I started my military career in Texas. Actually, I went to the Marine Military Academy in Harlingen, and it was don't make the faces. It's a wonderful place, great place for a young man to understand what matters in life. And I sent myself there, which wasn't the case of all my classmates. But I was there because they had a nomination to the Naval Academy, which I ended up getting.
Congratulations!
Thanks. I think it was also because I was the only child of a single mom, and I knew that I had grown up in an environment that was not going to channel me in the right directions. So when I was 16, I told my mom I'm joining the military. She said, over my dead body. We had a negotiation. And I said, okay, fine. I won't just enlist. I won't join the Foreign Legion. But if I'm going to be an officer, I'm going to military school next year. And so I got myself shipped off to the Marine Military Academy. Fantastic experience. It's staffed by, at the time, Vietnam and Korean vets. Like, if you can imagine a Korean vet actually seeing one of those walking around. And this guy was amazing. He was 80 years old. He could still do those push-ups where your feet aren't on the ground, but your body's completely parallel to the ground. And he would run with us every morning. It was just amazing people.
Wow.
Why did I get into that?
Viridian Gate.
Viridian Gate, yeah. So I noticed that those guys, when they retired, after about a year, they dropped dead. So they did full career in the military, stayed in uniform, joined the Marine Military Academy, did it until they couldn't run anymore because, some of those guys, their knees were giving out. And within a year or two of them quitting, they died.
They lost their passion.
Because you need something to keep you alive. You have to
have a
stay
passion.
active. And for me, when I was ending my military career, I did two things. I switched from Muay Thai to Tai Chi. And I switched from games to writing because I knew that Tai Chi was something that I would be able to do for the rest of my life. And I remember my first Sifu in New York a week before he died of cancer, ramrod straight, and he would go out every year in Bryant Park, and he would knock like 20-year-olds 10 feet backwards with a push. And it was just kind of that idea of being rooted and being able to move. And writing, I know, just based off the personality I have, whether it's coding, whether it's video editing, whether it's art, I need something that I can dump an infinite amount of work into. And writing is that, right? It's that thing that if you've got more time, you can spend more time. If you don't have a lot of time, you can write something short. And that's what I needed.
Ooh. Sorry, that was some loud thunder. I don't know if it was picked up on the mic. I apologize if it was.
Yeah, no worries.
They didn't get my memo where I said hold the thunderstorm till after the recording. I mean, they just don't listen.
Texas thunderstorms, though. Just generally the South, downpours are amazing. I miss the sound of it. But back to Viridian and Guiding Line. So
yes.
Writing was really important for my mental health, and I knew that from when I decided to get serious about it. But I put out my first series, and I am not a marketer. One of the reasons I love working with Shadow Alley Press is I'm not a marketer. I'm a writer. I'm a process guy. I do like spreadsheets. I like figuring out how we're going to do things and do them a lot and do them fast. But I'm not a huge marketing person. It just doesn't click for me. I like writing blurbs, but actually deploying them is just, it doesn't turn me on. So I didn't do any marketing for my first series, and while it got very good reviews, and I think what I did was I delivered a vampire story that had nothing to do with Twilight. It's closer to Underworld, but it's still kind of got that little bit of a YA vibe. It's realistic. It's what if vampires were real? And I'm really pleased with how it turned out, except for that abominably slow start. But
and that's the Black Year series, right?
Yep, that's the Black Year series. But I didn't do any marketing study, right? I didn't know that writing urban fiction is tough. I didn't know that the market was saturated with vampire books. I didn't know that the type of people who read vampire books don't want a vampire book that's not Twilight.
At least not at that time.
You know, I think one of the things that I pride myself on actually is in every series I've launched, I've had at least one review that said, I don't usually read this thing that you've written, but I really liked this and now I want to read more of it. And that's what I did with Black Fall, but I didn't sell very much, and the only way I got it out was by giving it away. And I was kind of really disheartened about it. And you know, part of the bad side of being the only child and growing up in Monaco and then joining the Marine Corps and doing all this really silly stuff that consumes a lot of your life is that you have this expectation that you need to win. And if I'm not winning, I have a tendency to want to walk away from the table. And I wasn't winning. And I'd met another Marine, James Hunter, who had started writing for similar reasons under similar circumstances, except he really went for it, right? He said, I'm going to go all in, whereas I kept my day job. And he got good at the marketing, right? He got really good at it. And I think that I had a right combination of someone who was really good at something that it's not that I'm bad at it, it's that I have no interest in getting good at it. I'd rather invest in my strengths.
Yes,
and so it was a combination of someone I trusted and someone who had a key skill that I didn't have. And he opened a call for submission on Viridian Gate Online. And I said to myself, James has been really successful. I want to know what he's doing that I'm not. I want to write something. I don't want it to be a big deal. I'll just do a short story. So I read all. I had no experience with Gamelit other than, you know, Tron and watching Sword Art Online. And I read all of the Viridian books up to that had been written up to that point in about a week. And I cranked out a short story, and my goal was, I don't know if he's going to choose this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with Zach's story. I'm going to write what came before. I'm going to take your story and I'm going to say, okay, these are all the things that you've set up. What would it take to get this to work and happen, and so on and so forth, building in a little bit of the tech, talking about, you know, okay, we're talking about this is a blockchain stored identity. How does that work? We talk about people die when they log in. How does that work? How did they get past, you know, safety testing with that mechanic going on? There must have been a lot of forces at work. And so I wrote a lit RPG story about a guy who's not a gamer, who doesn't like min-maxing. He wants to live in the world. And I broke a lot of rules and I really enjoyed it. They liked it enough. I think we knew each other and we respected each other as writers, but they liked what I was kind of bringing to the universe enough that they asked me if I would be willing to do a series. And by asked me if I was willing to do a series, I mean, they barely mentioned it, and I showed them the outline for 3 books. And they let me write it. And the first book is kind of a coming of age, you know, fun thing. The second one is more of like horror and steampunk, and the third one is a romance. You know, same principle as Fivefold, right? It's how do I take a universe, a world, characters that people like, and how do I bring that together in a different set of stories that is told with a really consistent level of quality. I'm super something retentive about edits and making sure that I over research things. But I had a lot of fun with it. I wrote a lot of back stuff for the universe, and I'm really pleased that I got to have that experience. And now I'm actually working on with James. So James wrote Cataclysm, which is the main story, and everyone loves it, and they should. And by the way, Doomforge is an amazing book. I wrote what happened 1 year before that, though that's kind of like time twisty because the God of Time is involved. And then now we're writing what happened 17 years after that in an episodic series called Portal Mage, as a collaboration between me and James. So that's another thing that we've been working on.
Well, so this series is lit RPG. Can you tell the audience a little bit, what are the tropes in lit RPG? Because it can be confusing.
So there's actually two things, right? There's lit RPG and there's game lit. And game lit is what you usually see kind of in the broad appeal. It just means you dropped into a video game. Somehow that video game is more important than a normal video game. It's impacting the world. Generally speaking, it means that you're immersed in it. So you've got some kind of plug-in to your nervous system where you're actually inside the game. Sometimes I've seen VR lit RPG or VR game lit. It's more rare. But what it's really about is wish fulfillment. It's I can be anyone and I can become anyone. And I'm going to start from zero, right? Me and the wealthiest person in the world are going to start from zero. And by hook and by crook and by gaming the system and by working hard, we are going to achieve amazing world-changing things. And that's the fundamental nature of both game lit and lit RPG. Lit RPG takes it a little bit further, and it says this world has rules. It has very strict rules. You can't break them. And in order to win, you need to figure out how to use the rules to your advantage. And if you break the rules, and it's too easy, the readers will hate you. And if you don't have rules, the readers will hate you. And they're very opinionated, but they reward you if you do a good job of it. And so the hallmark of lit RPG versus game lit is usually you have stat sheets and you have to figure out how to use the skills to do it versus, just wanting it really hard, which might work out in a game lit.
Excellent. So it's kind of the difference between hard sci-fi and space opera.
Yeah, absolutely. It is exactly that difference.
That's awesome. Well, you said you read a lot and you read a lot growing up too. What are your author idols, or who I should say are your author idols?
I have a bunch of different answers to that. I think one of the books I keep coming back to is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I know a lot of people don't like it. I've had some pretty strong reactions against it, partly because it's very male-oriented. But for a young man who didn't have a lot of male role models, it was a hell of a book to read, and my grandmother gave it to me. So I didn't get the kind of sense that this is a boys' club and this is this was something that my grandmother thought would be good for me to have in my head, and I always appreciate that. I'm a big fan of Ian M. Banks, who is a Scottish writer who died way too soon. He wrote these mind-blowing books called the Culture Novels, and what he really did was he showed a far future utopian society where AIs and humans who were augmented in all kinds of crazy ways could coexist, and how that would really work, and got them into all sorts of interesting hijinks. I'm a big fan of Modesset. I think, I've read and reread the Imager portfolio so many times. He does such amazing world building, and he sets up the rules and then he uses them. It's not lit RPG, but the spirit's there, and it's just super consistent. And then, he writes 3, 3, 3, and then he flips over next series and it's just as good. And he's been doing it for so long. I think that's amazing. Just in terms of, kind of delivering quality to your readers. I find that super impressive. I'm a big fan of Solomon. I think he wrote some pretty cool stuff. If you look at Ecclesiastes, it's just straight philosophy. And Proverbs is pretty cool too. What else have I read recently? I jumped back to Aristotle and read the Poetics. I thought it was pretty cool that he described method acting before, he was actually talking about how there are two types of actors. There are actors who can fake it, and there are actors who are deranged enough to believe they are the character. It tickles me that this Greek dude from way before was thinking of the same problems that we're dealing with in Hollywood today. I just love the fact that he was talking about things that were relevant today. And I love the concept that people today maybe have a little bit of a better education, maybe a little bit better IQs as a fundamental, but we're not that terribly different from the people who were running around 5,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, for that matter.
I agree. It is so fascinating.
Yeah.
So fascinating. My son's taking a philosophy class right now, and he talks about the different philosophers, and it's fun watching him discover them.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. The human brain has not changed that much. Society's changed, technology has changed, but the human brain, not so much.
That's like the old quote, right? If I've seen far, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But yeah, I think all of those are good books and worth reading. I could just keep listing, but those are the ones that come off the top of my head.
Nice. Besides, your CIA duties, what hobbies do you enjoy to refill your creative cup?
So that's a tough one. I actually just write. When I wrote The Illusionist, I was working the same job I have now, which is 9:30 in the morning until 7:30 at night. I'd spend an hour to kind of cook and eat, and then I'd write till about 2 a.m. And that's how I got through 3 books in about 7 months. So
you are friends with James A. Hunter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an Aaron Crash. I'm not a Sam Witt. I can't crank out a book in a week or a book in a month. I'm not that person. I can pretty.
You might be able to if you didn't have a full-time job, though. I think you could do it.
Actually, that is a point. For the past 2 days, I've been hitting 2,000 words a day, so that's 2 months a book, right? If I had more time, maybe I would, or maybe I'd just goof off. I don't know. It depends if I'd be allowed to do my stuff from midnight to 6, maybe I'd get that.
Okay.
I think I have a little bit different perspective than some people who I really admire as commercial writers, because they have such an output. For the output plus quality really gets there. Like I know Dakota Kraut puts out 5,000 words a day, rain or shine, and I admire the hell out of that.
And he doesn't throw away half of them. That's what I do if I have a 5,000 word day.
Yeah. And we have guys in our channel who do 10,000 words a day, and I'm just kind of like blown away. And the words keep getting better too. So it's not like it's just garbage. It's actually good words. So I admire that. I'm in the position right now, because of my family situation, I'm not willing to sacrifice my kind of job security for something. When I was my teens, I went to drama camp, and we had actual actors teaching it. And the first thing they said,
drama camp to Marine school?
This was before. This was when I was 14. It took me 2 more years to completely change directions, but I did that a couple times in my life. But when I was 14, I went to a drama camp with these really amazing people who decided to make acting their lives. And the first thing they told all of us is, if you want to make this your life, just understand that you may spend your entire career, not like even the beginning, but your entire career, working 2 jobs and then going hungry while you do a free gig. And if you're not okay with that, don't be an actor. And I wasn't okay with that. And I'm still not okay with starving in order to write books, because I have a family to take care of. So that's not a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I think under the right conditions, I would immediately jump ship and do it. But I'm not in that situation right now, and I would want to be set up to succeed before I do that crossover. So that does 2 things for me. One, I don't have that fire kind of burning behind me, where if I don't write, I don't eat. And that means that there have been periods in my life, like before I started the VGO books, where I could have just said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. It's too much effort, and I'm not getting enough reward out of it. And I think I've reached the point where even without that fire, I know I'm going to keep writing. It's important to me. And the things that I put into it are important to other people. I'm starting to get kind of like the impact of the writing is changing as I get better, and I'm still getting better. And it kind of becomes that one thing that, I know some people are like amazing violinists, they're amazing traders, they're amazing this. Writing is my thing. And I think I could get really good at it. And I'm going to do that. It is my only hobby.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's a lot of work to be a hobby, but let's face it, there's lots of people that put a lot of work in their hobbies.
Yep.
So makes total sense to me. So I think we are almost at an hour. So I think we have to do lightning round. You ready for lightning round to finish us up?
Yep.
All right. First, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Right now it's Netflix and chilled.
But is that ice cream?
Yeah, it's Ben and Jerry's. It's kind of like a peanut butter caramel and pretzel, I think.
How fascinating. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Mhm.
Hot or cold weather?
Hot.
Excellent. And you're in Switzerland? I'm so sorry.
It's 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It was 85 degrees today. Yeah.
What part of your daily routine is an absolute must?
Writing.
Good answer. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. And tea. But nice of both. I don't drink coffee just to drink coffee unless I need to perform. So I will use caffeine. But otherwise, I like specialty coffee and specialty tea.
Nice. Yes, coffee for me is to concentrate, not to wake up. Let's see. Cats or dogs?
Dogs. Definitely dogs.
What, not foxes?
I love foxes. I think foxes are great. I couldn't have one.
Polos or button-ups?
Neither. I'm really a big fan of t-shirts. I've thought about for a personal brand, I've looked up stores that do cyberpunk clothing, and I think it looks really cool. I'd probably have to move to New York to be able to wear it though. Yeah,
or go to a convention. You could wear it at a convention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I wanted to when I was a kid, I would always every Halloween I would be a ninja, and everyone would be like, "You were a ninja last year," and it was it's still what I want to be. So I'm pretty consistent like that.
So Halloween's career day for you.
Yep.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, excellent. We made it. So what I would like to know, DJ, is where can fans find you and your work?
So the best way is just to Google DJ Bodden. You'll find me on a whole bunch of channels. You can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Patreon. If you go on my Twitter, there's a link, and that link takes you to a switchboard that my marketing person and it has all my links on it. So that's the easiest way. But what about your stuff?
For us, well, actually, what I'm hoping is that everyone, now that they love you, and I know people in chat have already bought your book, that's how much you won them over. So for everyone who gets his book, please make sure to review his work. It's a present that you can give your author. Also, please review this podcast, wherever it is you get your podcast. You can also follow on Twitch and subscribe on YouTube. Yes, they use different words just to confuse me. It's very mean of them. And we do want to thank our subscribers on Twitch who are DH Dunn, Roger, and Blanket Fort Stories. You help us keep these lights on, literally. So thank you very much. And we will see you next week. Oh, actually, we will not see you next week. I'm taking a Tuesday off, everyone. Shh, don't tell. But the Tuesday after that, we'll have Jaylyn Else. So we'll have her on the 29th. So y'all have a great time, and we'll see you next time.